My name is Emily. I'm 28 years old, and I never thought a single sentence would destroy my entire family. But there I was, standing in my mother's pristine dining room in her Upper East Side apartment, watching my half-brother's face turn white as a sheet after I'd just exposed his deepest secret in front of everyone. It started as a typical Sunday dinner at Mom's house. The November wind was howling outside, rattling the windows of her 19th floor apartment overlooking Central Park, while inside, the familiar tension of forced family gatherings hung in the air like smoke. My stepfather Marcus had prepared his famous pot roast, and Mom had set the table with her best china, the same set she'd inherited from Grandma Rose. If you're enjoying this story and want to hear more dramatic family revelations, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what you think will happen next. My half-brother Jacob, 24, had been making snide comments about my appearance all evening. Fresh out of his finance degree and working at some startup downtown, he thought he was God's gift to the world. His girlfriend Madison sat beside him, giggling at every cruel joke he made about my weight, my clothes, my single status. "You know, Emily," Jacob said, cutting into his roast with unnecessary force, "maybe if you hit the gym instead of hitting the drive-thru, you'd actually have a boyfriend by now." The table went silent. Mom's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Marcus cleared his throat uncomfortably. My younger sister Chloe, only 16, stared at her plate like she could disappear into it. I'd heard variations of this comment from Jacob for years. Ever since Mom married Marcus when I was 15 and Jacob was 11, he'd treated me like an outsider. But tonight, something inside me snapped. Maybe it was the wine. Maybe it was the stress from my recent job loss. Or maybe I was just tired of being everyone's punching bag. "That's enough, Jacob," I said quietly, my hands trembling as I set down my water glass. "Oh, come on. I'm just being honest," he laughed, looking around the table for support. "Someone needs to tell her the truth. Look at her. When was the last time you went on a date? Mom's always worried about you ending up alone." The cruelty in his voice cut deeper than usual. I could feel tears burning behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of him. That's when I noticed it. The way Marcus's jaw tightened when Jacob spoke. The way his eyes darted nervously between Jacob and me. The way his wedding ring caught the light from the crystal chandelier as his fingers drummed against the table. I'd been keeping Marcus's secret for 3 months now. 3 months since I'd accidentally discovered something that would shatter our family if it ever came to light. I'd stayed quiet, tried to pretend I hadn't seen what I'd seen. But watching Jacob tear me down while Marcus sat there silent, it was too much. "You want to talk about honesty, Jacob?" I said, my voice deadly calm. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Why don't you ask your stepfather about your late nights?" The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Jacob's fork clattered to his plate. Madison's eyes widened. Mom looked confused, but Marcus looked like he was about to be sick. "What are you talking about?" Jacob's voice cracked slightly, the confident smirk finally sliding off his face. I looked directly at Marcus, whose face had gone ashen. His hands were shaking now, and he couldn't meet anyone's eyes. The secret I'd been carrying felt like poison in my chest, and I was finally ready to spit it out. "Tell him, Marcus," I said softly. "Tell him about your little visits to his apartment. Tell him about the things you do when Mom thinks you're working late." The silence that followed was deafening. Outside, the November wind seemed to grow stronger, as if nature itself was responding to the storm I'd just unleashed in this perfect suburban dining room. Marcus pushed back from the table so hard his chair nearly toppled over. His face had gone from pale to gray, and beads of sweat were forming on his forehead, despite the cool temperature Mom always kept the house at. "Emily, stop," he whispered, his voice barely audible. But I was past stopping. Years of Jacob's cruelty, years of watching him treat me like I was worthless, while everyone else just sat there and let it happen. It all came pouring out. "Stop what, Marcus?" I stood up, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "Stop telling the truth? Stop protecting the family secret?" "What secret?" Mom's voice was sharp now, cutting through the tension. Her green eyes, the same ones I'd inherited, darted between Marcus and me. "What are you talking about, Emily?" Jacob was staring at Marcus with growing horror. Madison had gone completely silent, her perfectly manicured hand covering her mouth. Chloe looked like she wanted to run upstairs and hide in her room. I took a deep breath, tasting the betrayal and hurt that had been building inside me for months. The pot roast smell that had seemed so comforting earlier now made my stomach turn. 3 months ago, I began, my voice steady despite my racing heart. I was driving back from that job interview in Midtown. You remember, Mom, the marketing position that didn't work out? Mom nodded slowly, her knuckles white as she gripped her napkin. I decided to stop by Jacob's apartment in the village to see if he wanted to grab dinner. You know, trying to be a good sister despite everything. I looked directly at Jacob, who was now gripping the edge of the table. But when I got there, I saw Marcus's car parked on the street. So? Jacob's voice was defensive, but I could hear the fear creeping in. He helps me with stuff sometimes. Fixes things. At 11 p.m. on a Tuesday night? I laughed bitterly. When he told Mom he was working late at the office? Marcus made a choking sound and stumbled toward the kitchen. We could hear him retching in the sink, the sound echoing off the granite countertops. Marcus? Mom called out, starting to rise from her chair. Sit down, Mom, I said firmly. Let me finish. The overhead chandelier cast harsh shadows across everyone's faces. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the lights of Fifth Avenue below, the city continuing its relentless pace while our world fell apart 19 floors above the street. I sat in my car for almost an hour. I continued. I thought maybe he really was helping Jacob with something. But then I saw them through the apartment window. My voice cracked slightly. They weren't fixing anything, Jacob. They were together. The words hit the room like a physical blow. Madison gasped and pushed her chair back from the table. Chloe's eyes went wide with shock and confusion. Together how? Mom's voice was barely a whisper. Jacob was shaking his head frantically. No, no, no. Emily, you're lying. You're making this up because you're jealous, because you can't stand that I have my life together and you don't. Am I lying, Jacob? I pulled out my phone with trembling fingers. Because I have photos. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the wind outside seemed to hold its breath. Marcus had stopped retching and was standing in the kitchen doorway, his face wet with tears and sweat. Photos of what? Mom's voice was hollow now, like she already knew the answer but needed to hear it anyway. I looked at the screen of my phone, at the images I'd never wanted to take, never wanted to see, the images that had been haunting my dreams for 3 months. Photos of your husband and your son, I said quietly, doing things that would destroy this family if anyone else ever found out. Jacob lunged across the table toward me, knocking over his wine glass in the process. The red liquid spread across Mom's white tablecloth like blood. You sick, twisted, he started to scream, but Marcus's voice cut him off. Stop. Marcus's voice was broken, defeated. Just stop. He walked back into the dining room like a man heading to his execution. His shoulders were slumped, and he couldn't look at any of us. She's telling the truth, he whispered. The confession hit Mom like a physical blow. She doubled over in her chair, making a sound I'd never heard from her before. A raw, animalistic keen of pain and betrayal. And that's when I realized what I'd done. In my moment of revenge, in my need to hurt Jacob the way he'd hurt me, I'd destroyed everything. I'd shattered our family into pieces that could never be put back together. Make sure to like this video if you want to see how this family drama unfolds, because what happens next will shock you even more. The next few minutes felt like watching a car accident in slow motion. Mom collapsed forward onto the table, her body shaking with sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep in her soul. The sound was worse than screaming. It was the sound of a woman's entire world crumbling. Jennifer, please. Marcus reached toward her, but she flinched away from his touch like he was on fire. Don't. Her voice was raw, barely human. Don't you dare touch me. Jacob was standing now, backing away from the table like he could escape the truth by putting distance between himself and the rest of us. His face had gone through several colors, white, green, now a sickly gray that matched the November sky outside. This isn't what it looks like, he stammered. But even he didn't sound convinced. Madison was gathering her purse with shaking hands. I need to go, she whispered. I need to go right now. Maddie, wait. Jacob reached for her, but she yanked her arm away. Don't touch me. Don't ever touch me again. She was crying now, mascara streaming down her cheeks. How could you not tell me? How could you let me think? God, Jacob, I thought we were going to get married. She ran toward the front door, her heels clicking frantically against the hardwood. The door slammed so hard it rattled the family photos hanging in the hallway. Chloe had finally spoken up, her young voice confused and frightened. Mom? What's happening? I don't understand what Emily's talking about. I looked at my baby sister, still so innocent at 16, still believing that families were safe places where people loved and protected each other. How could I explain that the man she called Dad and the brother she looked up to had been living a lie that would destroy everything she thought she knew about her life? Chloe, honey. Mom's voice was thick with tears. Go upstairs. Please. Just go to your room. But Mom, now! Mom's shout was so sudden and violent that we all jumped. Chloe ran upstairs, and we heard her bedroom door slam. The silence that followed was deafening. The four of us stood in the dining room surrounded by the wreckage of our Sunday dinner. Overturned wine glasses, cold food, and the suffocating weight of a secret that had finally seen the light. Marcus was the first to speak. Jennifer, I can explain. Explain? Mom's voice was getting stronger, fueled by a rage I'd never seen in her before. She stood up slowly, her hands pressed flat against the table. Explain how you've been sleeping with my son. Explain how you've been lying to me for God knows how long. Explain how you've made me an accomplice to whatever sick thing this is. It's not sick, Jacob said suddenly, his voice defiant. You don't understand. It's not what you think. Mom turned to look at him, and I saw something die in her eyes. What I think, Jacob, is that you're my baby boy, the child I carried and gave birth to and raised and loved more than my own life. And now you're telling me that you and my husband— She couldn't finish the sentence. He's not really my father, Jacob said, and his words cut through the room like a knife. We're not blood related. It's not technically— Technically? Mom's voice rose to a shriek. Technically? Jacob, I married Marcus when you were 11 years old. He helped raise you. He walked you to school, helped with your homework, taught you to drive. And you think technicalities matter? The November wind rattled the windows again, and somewhere in the distance, I heard the sound of sirens, life going on normally just outside our bubble of destruction. I realized I was still holding my phone, still had those damning photos ready to show, the evidence of what I'd witnessed that night 3 months ago, the evidence that had been eating me alive ever since. How long? Mom asked, her voice deadly quiet now. How long has this been going on? Marcus and Jacob looked at each other, and in that moment, I saw something pass between them that made my stomach turn. It wasn't shame or guilt. It was a kind of desperate love, a connection that went deeper than anything I'd expected. 2 years, Marcus whispered. Mom's knees buckled. She caught herself on the back of her chair, her face cycling through every stage of grief in a matter of seconds. 2 years, she repeated. 2 years of lying to my face. 2 years of me thinking I had a happy marriage and a normal family. 2 years of— She looked at me suddenly. You've known for 3 months? The accusation in her voice hit me like a slap. Mom, You've known for 3 months and you said nothing? You let me keep living this lie? I didn't know what to do. The words burst out of me. I didn't want to hurt you. I thought maybe it was a mistake. Maybe it would end. Maybe you could use it as ammunition when Jacob hurt your feelings. Her voice was ice cold now. Maybe you could save it up for the perfect moment to destroy all of our lives. The truth of what she was saying hit me like a physical blow. Because that's exactly what I'd done, wasn't it? I'd kept their secret not to protect the family, but to protect my own ammunition. To have something to use against Jacob when he inevitably hurt me again. And now, looking at the devastation around me, Mom's tear-streaked face, Marcus's broken posture, Jacob's desperate eyes, I realized I'd become the monster in this story. The next morning, I woke up in my small studio apartment in Brooklyn, with a hangover that had nothing to do with alcohol. After the dinner disaster, I'd taken the subway home through the late-night emptiness of Manhattan, replaying every moment, every word, every look of betrayal and pain. My phone had been buzzing all night, missed calls from Mom, from Chloe, even from Jacob, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. What was I supposed to say? That I was sorry for destroying our family? That I was sorry for telling the truth? The November sunlight filtering through my small window was gray and weak, matching my mood perfectly. My studio felt smaller than usual, cluttered with the evidence of my unemployed life, takeout containers, unpaid bills, and the laptop where I'd been half-heartedly job hunting for months. I was making coffee when the pounding on my door started. "Emily, open up! I know you're in there!" Jacob's voice, raw and desperate. I considered ignoring him, but the pounding got louder and more insistent. My neighbors were going to complain, and I couldn't afford to lose this apartment too. I opened the door to find Jacob looking like he hadn't slept at all. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his clothes wrinkled, and his eyes were red-rimmed and wild. "We need to talk," he said, pushing past me into the apartment. "Good morning to you too," I muttered, closing the door behind him. He spun around to face me, and I was shocked by the desperation in his expression. This wasn't the confident, cruel Jacob who'd mocked me at dinner. This was someone who'd been broken open, exposed, left raw and bleeding. "You have to delete those photos," he said without preamble. "Excuse me? The photos on your phone. You have to delete them. Promise me you'll delete them." I poured myself coffee with shaking hands, trying to buy time to think. "Jacob, what happened last night? What happened last night is that you destroyed my entire life." His voice cracked on the last word. "Madison won't answer my calls. Mom won't look at me. Marcus is talking about leaving town. Everything is falling apart because you couldn't keep your mouth shut." "Because I couldn't keep my mouth shut?" I turned to face him, my own anger flaring. "Jacob, you were sleeping with our stepfather. You were lying to everyone, including your girlfriend." "It wasn't supposed to be like this," he said, collapsing onto my couch like his strings had been cut. It happened. And then it kept happening. And I know how it looks. I know how wrong it seems. But Emily, I love him." The words hung in the air between us. "I love him," said with such raw honesty that it made my chest ache. "You love him," I repeated slowly. "Yes." His voice was barely a whisper. "I know you can't understand it. I know it's complicated and messy and wrong in so many ways. But I love him, and he loves me. And we never meant for anyone to get hurt." I sat down in the chair across from him, studying his face. Without the usual mask of cruelty and superiority, Jacob looked younger, more vulnerable, more like the scared little boy who'd come into our family when Mom married Marcus. "When did it start?" I asked quietly. He was quiet for so long I thought he wasn't going to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. 2 years ago. I'd graduated college, gotten my own place in the village. I was struggling with rent, with bills. Marcus offered to help. He'd come over to give me money, to help me set up my apartment, to be there for me in a way my real father never was. I remembered Jacob's biological father, a man who'd walked out when Jacob was 3 and never looked back. Marcus had been the only father figure Jacob had ever really known. One night, I was having a panic attack about job interviews, about my future. Marcus came over to help me calm down. We were sitting on my couch and he was telling me everything would be okay. And I kissed him. The confession hung between us like smoke. I could see the memory playing out in Jacob's eyes, the moment that had changed everything. He pulled away at first, Jacob continued. Said it was wrong, that he was married to my mother, that it couldn't happen. But I kept pushing. I kept telling him how I felt, how long I'd felt that way. And eventually he gave in. Jacob nodded, tears streaming down his face. We told ourselves it was just once, just a mistake. But then it happened again, and again. And before we knew it, we were in this secret relationship that was destroying both of us, but that we couldn't stop. I thought about the photos on my phone, the evidence of their affair that I'd captured that night 3 months ago, the images that had given me power over both of them, power I'd ultimately used to hurt Jacob when he'd hurt me. What about Madison? I asked. Madison was a cover, a way to make everything look normal. She's a good person, Emily. She doesn't deserve what happened to her. And Mom? Jacob's face crumpled completely. Mom is going to hate me forever. She'll never forgive me for this. I've lost her. I've lost Marcus. I've lost everything. Looking at my half-brother, really looking at him for the first time in years, I realized something that shook me to my core. His cruelty toward me, his constant need to put me down and make me feel small, hadn't been about me at all. It had been about his own self-hatred, his own shame about what he was doing in secret. He'd been lashing out at me because I was safe to hurt. Because unlike Marcus, unlike Mom, I couldn't abandon him. I was stuck being his sister whether he treated me well or not. Jacob, I said quietly, the things you said to me last night, the things you've been saying to me for years, that's not okay. Just because you were struggling with your own secrets doesn't give you the right to hurt me. He looked up at me, and for the first time I could remember, there was genuine remorse in his eyes. You're right, he whispered. I'm so sorry, Emily. I'm sorry for everything. I took my anger and shame out on you because you were the only one I could hurt without consequences. And that's not fair. That's not the kind of person I want to be. It was the apology I'd been waiting years to hear. But now that it was here, surrounded by the wreckage of our family, it felt hollow. Too little. Too late. I need to know, I said. Are you going to keep seeing him? Jacob was quiet for a long moment. I don't know, he finally admitted. I don't know if there's any way back from this. Mom will never accept it. The family is destroyed. Maybe it's better if I just leave Chicago, start over somewhere else. The thought of Jacob leaving, of our family scattering to the winds, made my chest tight. Despite everything, despite years of his cruelty and my resentment, he was still my brother, and I was the one who'd lit the match that burned everything down. If you're invested in this family's journey and want to see if there's any chance for redemption, make sure you're subscribed, because the next chapter will determine whether this family can ever heal from this betrayal. 3 days passed before Mom finally called me. 3 days of radio silence while I sat in my studio apartment, scrolling through job listings I couldn't focus on and staring at my phone, waiting for some sign that our family hadn't been completely destroyed. When her name finally appeared on my screen, my hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. Mom? We need to talk. Her voice was different, flatter, more controlled than I'd ever heard it. Can you come over? Marcus isn't here anymore. The subway ride to Mom's apartment felt like traveling through a ghost town. The familiar stations of my childhood looked different somehow, like I was seeing them through a film of grief. The November landscape visible from the elevated portions was gray and barren, matching the desolation I felt inside. Mom answered the door looking like she'd aged 10 years in 3 days. Her usually perfect blonde hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She wasn't wearing makeup, and her eyes were swollen from crying. She looked smaller somehow, like the revelation had physically diminished her. Where is he? I asked, as she led me into the living room. Gone. He packed a bag Tuesday night and left. Said he needed time to think, time to figure out what he was going to do. She sat down heavily on the cream-colored sofa, the same sofa where we used to watch movies together when I was a teenager. He took the photos from the mantel, the ones of him and Jacob at Jacob's graduation, at Christmas, all the father-son moments I thought were so sweet. I looked at the mantel above the marble fireplace and saw the gaps where those photos used to be, like missing teeth in a smile. Have you talked to him? Briefly. He called yesterday to say he's staying at a hotel in Midtown. He wants to work things out. He says he loves me, that what he has with Jacob doesn't change what we have together. She laughed bitterly. Like I'm supposed to share my husband with my son. Like that's a reasonable thing to ask. The living room felt tomb-like in the gray afternoon light. Mom had always kept this room perfect. Every pillow fluffed, every surface dusted, every art book on the coffee table aligned just so. Now there were tissues scattered across the glass surface, and I could see rings from coffee mugs staining the polished wood underneath. What about Jacob? Jacob. Mom's voice went flat again. Jacob has been calling and texting constantly. He wants to explain, wants to make me understand. He sent me a 10-page letter yesterday, trying to justify what they've been doing. What did it say? Mom reached into the pocket of her sweater and pulled out several folded sheets of paper. Her hands trembled as she unfolded them. It says he's sorry for hurting me. But he's not sorry for loving Marcus. It says Marcus has been more of a father to him than his biological father ever was, and that somewhere along the way, that love became something else, something deeper. She was reading directly from the letter now, her voice thick with unshed tears. He says he knows it's unconventional, but love doesn't follow rules. He says he's not asking me to approve, just to understand. He says, her voice broke, he says he'll always be my son, but Marcus is the love of his life, and he can't give that up just because it makes other people uncomfortable. The words hit me like physical blows. I could hear Jacob's voice in them, the same defiant tone he'd used at dinner, the same unwillingness to back down even when he was clearly wrong. What are you going to do? Mom folded the letter carefully and put it back in her pocket. I don't know. I've been married to Marcus for 13 years, Emily. 13 years of thinking I knew him, thinking I understood our life together. And now I find out that for the last 2 years, he's been living a completely different life with my son. She stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. The park was brown and dormant now, the trees skeletal against the gray November sky, waiting for winter to fully claim the city. The worst part, she continued, her voice barely above a whisper, is that I keep thinking about signs I might have missed. Times when Marcus came home late, when Jacob would get weird and uncomfortable around family gatherings, when they'd have these private conversations that would stop when I walked into the room. Mom, you couldn't have known, couldn't I? What kind of wife doesn't notice that her husband is having an affair? What kind of mother doesn't see that her son is, that he's... She couldn't finish the sentence. I joined her at the window, looking out at the barren landscape. It's not your fault, isn't it? She turned to face me, and I saw a pain in her eyes that went deeper than betrayal. I raised Jacob. I chose to marry Marcus. I created this family dynamic where somehow this became possible, where my husband and my son could fall in love right under my nose and I was too blind or too stupid to see it. That's not how it works, Mom. You didn't cause this. Then who did? The question exploded out of her. Because someone has to be responsible for this nightmare. Someone has to be blamed for the fact that my marriage is over and I've lost my son, and my entire life has been revealed to be a lie. The anger in her voice was raw and desperate. The anger of someone who needed a target for all the pain she was carrying. And I realized with a sinking heart that I might be that target. Is that why you wanted me to come over? I asked quietly. To blame me for this? Mom's face crumpled. I don't know. Maybe. I keep thinking that if you'd told me 3 months ago when you first found out, maybe I could have stopped it. Maybe I could have gotten them help, or counseling, or something. Maybe our family could have been saved. Or maybe it would have exploded 3 months earlier. At least then I wouldn't have spent 3 more months living a lie. She was crying now, the controlled facade finally cracking. 3 more months of kissing my husband goodnight while he was thinking about my son. 3 more months of planning our future while he was planning a life with Jacob. I reached out to comfort her, but she stepped away from my touch. I need to know something, Emily, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Okay. When you saw them together that night, when you took those photos, did you think about telling me right away? The question hung in the air between us. I could lie, tell her I'd been paralyzed by shock, that I'd needed time to process what I'd seen. But looking at her broken face, I knew she deserved the truth. No, I said quietly. I didn't. Why not? I took a deep breath, tasting the shame and regret that had been building in my chest for days. Because I was angry. At Jacob, at you, at the whole situation. And having this secret, it felt like power. Like for once I had something over Jacob that he couldn't take away from me. Mom stared at me for a long moment, and I watched something shift in her expression. Not anger, exactly, but a kind of tired disappointment that was almost worse. So you used my family's destruction as a weapon in your petty war with your brother. Mom, it wasn't what, Emily? It wasn't calculated. It wasn't cruel. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like all 3 of my children betrayed me. Jacob and Marcus with their affair, and you with your silence. The words hit me like a physical blow because they were true. In my need for revenge against Jacob, I'd betrayed Mom just as surely as they had. I'm sorry, I whispered. I know you are, she said, but there was no warmth in her voice. The question is, what are we going to do now? How do we move forward from this? How do we salvage anything from the wreckage you've all created? Looking at my mother, really looking at her for the first time since this nightmare began, I realized that the answer to those questions wasn't up to Jacob or Marcus or me. It was up to her. She was the one who'd been betrayed by all of us, and she was the one who would decide what came next. The question was, would she choose forgiveness or revenge, healing or destruction? And I wasn't sure any of us deserved her mercy. A week later, Chloe texted me, "Mom's in the hospital." I was in the middle of a job interview at a marketing firm in Midtown when my phone buzzed. The interviewer was asking about my experience with social media campaigns, but all I could see were those 4 words on my screen. "I'm sorry," I said, standing up abruptly. "I have a family emergency. I have to go." I didn't wait for a response. I grabbed my coat and ran out of the office building, my heels clicking frantically against the marble floor of the lobby. The November wind hit me like a slap as I burst onto the street, but I barely felt it. The taxi ride to Mount Sinai Hospital was a blur of traffic lights and honking horns. My mind was racing with possibilities: heart attack, stroke, accident. What if the stress of everything had literally broken her? What if I'd killed my mother with my need for revenge? I found Chloe in the ER waiting room, looking smaller and more fragile than her 16 years. She was still in her school uniform, the plaid skirt and white blouse from the private prep school Mom had insisted on, and her face was streaked with tears. "What happened?" I asked, pulling her into a hug. "She collapsed at work." Chloe sobbed into my shoulder. Her assistant called 911. The doctor said it's stress-related. Her blood pressure spiked, and she had some kind of panic attack or something. "Where is she now?" "They're running tests. The doctor said she's stable, but..." Chloe pulled back to look at me. "Emily, she's been taking sleeping pills. A lot of them. The doctor thinks she might have been taking too many." The words hit me like ice water. "On purpose? I don't know. Maybe. She hasn't been sleeping. She hasn't been eating. She goes to work, comes home, and just sits in her room crying. I tried to talk to her, but she acts like I'm not even there." I looked around the sterile waiting room with its fluorescent lights and plastic chairs. A few other families sat scattered around, their own private dramas playing out in hushed tones. The smell of disinfectant and fear hung heavy in the air. "Have you called Jacob?" Chloe shook her head. "I tried, but his phone goes straight to voicemail. I think he blocked me too." "Too?" "He blocked Mom after she told him not to contact her anymore. I guess he's been trying to call her constantly, showing up at her work, trying to explain or apologize or something." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of what we'd all done to each other. In trying to hurt Jacob, I'd set off a chain reaction that was destroying everyone I loved. "Emily?" A voice behind me made me turn around. Marcus stood in the doorway to the waiting room, looking haggard and desperate. He'd lost weight, his usually neat appearance disheveled. His hair was unwashed, his clothes wrinkled, and there were dark circles under his eyes. "What are you doing here?" I asked. Chloe called me. She said Jennifer was in the hospital. Chloe looked between us uncertainly. I didn't know who else to call. Jacob won't answer, and you weren't picking up. And I was scared. Marcus moved closer, and I could smell alcohol on his breath despite the early hour. "How is she?" "Stable. They think it's stress-related." He nodded, running a hand through his hair. "This is all my fault. If we hadn't, where's Jacob?" I asked. "I don't know. He's not answering my calls either. I think he's avoiding me as much as he's avoiding everyone else." The 3 of us sat in uncomfortable silence for a while, the weight of our collective guilt pressing down on us like a physical force. The waiting room TV was playing some mindless daytime show, the cheerful voices a stark contrast to the heaviness surrounding us. "Mr. Chen?" A doctor in scrubs appeared, clipboard in hand. "You're here for Jennifer Chen?" "That's us," I said, standing quickly. "We're her family." The doctor looked between Marcus and me uncertainly. "Are you her husband?" Yes," Marcus said quietly. If the doctor noticed the hesitation, he didn't comment. "She's stable now. We've got her blood pressure under control, and the panic attack has subsided. But I need to be honest with you. She's in a very fragile state, both physically and emotionally. Can we see her? Chloe asked. In a few minutes. But first, I need to ask some questions. Has Mrs. Chen been under any unusual stress lately? Any major life changes or traumatic events? Marcus and I looked at each other. How do you explain to a stranger that your family had imploded because of an affair between stepfather and stepson? There have been some family issues recently, I said carefully. I see. And the sleeping medication. How long has she been taking it? I'm not sure, Marcus admitted. We haven't been living together recently. The doctor made a note on his clipboard. The levels in her system suggest she's been taking more than the prescribed dosage. Not enough to be intentionally harmful, but enough to indicate she's not coping well with whatever she's going through. Is she going to be okay? Chloe's voice was small and scared. Physically, yes. But she needs support right now. Professional help, possibly. And she needs to reduce her stress levels significantly, or this could happen again. When we were finally allowed to see her, Mom looked so small in the hospital bed. The machines beeping around her made everything feel more serious, more real. Her face was pale against the white pillows, and her eyes were closed. Mom, Chloe whispered, approaching the bed carefully. Mom's eyes fluttered open, and when she saw us all standing there, her face crumpled. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry, baby. Chloe burst into tears and carefully hugged her, mindful of the IV line in Mom's arm. Don't be sorry, Mom. Just get better, okay? Mom's eyes found Marcus over Chloe's shoulder, and the pain that passed between them was almost too much to witness. You came, she said quietly. Of course I came. Jennifer, I'm so sorry. This is all my fault. No, Mom said firmly. It's all of our faults. We all made choices that led us here. Her gaze shifted to me, and I saw a mixture of hurt and exhaustion in her eyes. Emily, I need to ask you something. Anything. Those photos on your phone. Do you still have them? I nodded reluctantly. I want you to delete them. Right now. In front of me. Mom, please. I don't want those images to exist anymore. I don't want the evidence of what broke us apart to be out there in the world. With shaking hands, I pulled out my phone and navigated to the photos. The images that had started this whole nightmare. The proof of Marcus and Jacob together that had given me so much power and caused so much destruction. One by one I deleted them, then deleted them from the recently deleted folder too. Gone forever. It's done, I said quietly. Mom nodded and closed her eyes. Now we can all start over, if we want to. What does that mean? Marcus asked. It means, Mom said, opening her eyes again, that I'm tired of being angry. I'm tired of being hurt. I'm tired of holding on to pain that's killing me from the inside out. She struggled to sit up a little in the bed, and Marcus instinctively moved to help her, then stopped himself. Marcus, what you and Jacob did, it broke my heart. It shattered everything I thought I knew about my life and my family. But lying here, thinking I might die from the stress of it all, I realized something. We all waited, hanging on her words. I realized that I have a choice. I can let this destroy me completely, or I can find a way to live with it, to move forward. And if I'm going to move forward, I need to understand why it happened. Jennifer, Marcus started. Let me finish. Her voice was stronger now. I need to understand how my husband fell in love with my son. I need to understand how Jacob fell in love with the man who raised him. And I need to decide if there's any part of this family worth saving. The room was silent, except for the steady beeping of the heart monitor. I'm not saying I forgive you, Mom continued. I'm not saying I can accept what you've done, but I'm saying I want to try to understand it. Because the alternative is losing everyone I love, and I can't. I can't survive that. Marcus was crying now, silent tears streaming down his face. What do you need from me? Honesty. Complete honesty. No more secrets. No more lies. If we're going to have any chance of moving forward, I need to know everything. And Jacob? Mom's face tightened slightly. Jacob is my son. No matter what he's done, no matter who he's chosen to love, he's still my baby boy. But he needs to understand that actions have consequences, that love isn't always enough to fix the damage we do to each other. She looked at all of us in turn. Marcus, me, Chloe, We're all going to need therapy, family counseling, individual counseling. This family is broken, and if we want any chance of putting it back together, we need professional help. What about Jacob? I asked. He's not even talking to any of us. Then we'll have to find him, Mom said simply. Because despite everything, we're still a family. A very damaged, very complicated family, but a family nonetheless. As we left the hospital that evening, I realized that Mom's collapse had been both an ending and a beginning. The end of the secrets and lies that had been poisoning us all, and maybe, just maybe, the beginning of something that could eventually become healing. But first, we had to find Jacob and convince him to come home. It took us 3 days to track Jacob down. He wasn't at his apartment, wasn't at work, and none of his friends had heard from him. It was finally Madison who gave us the clue we needed. She'd seen him at a coffee shop in Soho, looking completely destroyed. I found him there on a gray Thursday morning, sitting alone in a corner booth with a cold cup of coffee and a 1,000-yard stare. He'd lost weight, his usually perfect appearance replaced by rumpled clothes and several days' worth of stubble. When he saw me approaching, he looked like he wanted to run. "Don't," I said, sliding into the booth across from him. "Please, just listen. If you're here to gloat, I'm here because Mom's in the hospital." The color drained from his face. "What? When? Is she okay?" "She collapsed from stress. Blood pressure, panic attack, too many sleeping pills. She's stable now, but Jacob, she almost died because of what we've all done to each other." He buried his face in his hands. "This is all my fault." "No, it's all of our faults. Mine, yours, Marcus's. We all made choices that led us here." The coffee shop around us was filled with the normal sounds of morning life. NYU students typing on laptops, business people grabbing their caffeine fix, the hiss and grind of the espresso machine. Normal people living normal lives while ours had fallen apart. "She wants to see you," I said quietly. "No, she doesn't. She told me never to contact her again. That was before. Things have changed. She's changed." Jacob looked up at me, and I saw hope flickering in his eyes despite himself. "What do you mean?" "She wants to understand, Jacob. She wants to know how this happened, why it happened. She's not saying she can forgive it, but she wants to try to understand it. And Marcus has been at the hospital every day. They haven't really talked yet, but there's something there, some possibility of moving forward." Jacob was quiet for a long time, staring out the window at the people walking by on the sidewalk. Finally, he spoke. "I never meant for any of this to happen, Emily. When I first kissed Marcus, it wasn't some calculated plan. I was lost and scared, and he was the only person who'd ever made me feel safe. And when he kissed me back, you fell in love." "Yeah. I fell in love with the man who'd been more of a father to me than my actual father. I fell in love with my mother's husband. I fell in love with someone I could never have a real relationship with, never have a future with, never even acknowledge publicly." He laughed bitterly. "Do you know what that's like? Being in love with someone you can never claim? Having to pretend that the most important person in your life is just your stepfather? Having to watch him kiss your mother goodnight while you pretend you don't care?" For the first time, I started to understand the pain he'd been carrying, the impossible situation he'd found himself in. "Is that why you were so cruel to me? Because you were hurting?" "Partly." He met my eyes for the first time since I'd sat down. "But mostly because I hated myself, and taking it out on you was easier than dealing with my own shame. Jacob, what you said to me at that dinner was unforgivable. I know that. I've always known that. And I'm sorry, Emily. I'm sorry for years of making you feel like you weren't good enough, like you didn't belong in our family. You didn't deserve that." The apology felt different this time. More real, more complete. "What are you going to do now?" I asked. "I don't know. I've been thinking about leaving New York, starting over somewhere else where no one knows our story. And Marcus?" Pain flashed across his face. "Marcus chose Mom, as he should have. Whatever we had, it's over now." "Is it?" "It has to be. Even if Mom somehow finds a way to forgive us, even if the family can somehow move past this, Marcus and I can never be together again. The cost is too high." I thought about Mom lying in that hospital bed, talking about wanting to understand rather than just judge, about second chances and the possibility of healing. Maybe, I said carefully. The question isn't whether you and Marcus can be together. Maybe the question is whether all of us can find a way to be a family again, even with everything that's happened. You really think that's possible? I don't know. But I think Mom's right. The alternative is losing everyone we love. And I can't accept that. Can you? Jacob was quiet for another long moment. Then he pulled out his phone. What are you doing? Calling Marcus. If we're really going to try to put this family back together, he needs to know where I am too. An hour later, Marcus walked into the coffee shop looking as haggard as Jacob. When he saw us sitting together, relief flooded his face. Thank God, he said, sliding into the booth next to me. I was so worried. I'm okay, Jacob said quietly. Well, no, I'm not okay. None of us are okay. But I'm ready to face whatever comes next. Marcus nodded. Jennifer wants to see us. All of us. Together. I know, Emily told me. Jacob, I need you to know. What we had, what we felt for each other, it was real. But it was also wrong. Not because of who we are, but because of who we are to each other. To Jennifer. To this family. I know. If we're going to move forward, if there's any chance of rebuilding what we've broken, we have to end this. Completely. Jacob's face crumpled, but he nodded. I know that too. Watching them say goodbye to their relationship, if that's what this was, felt like witnessing something sacred and heartbreaking at the same time. Two people who genuinely loved each other choosing to sacrifice that love for the possibility of saving their family. When we arrived at the hospital together, Mom was sitting up in bed, looking stronger than she had in days. Chloe was curled up in the chair beside her, doing homework. You found him, Mom said when she saw us. Actually, Emily found me, Jacob said, his voice barely above a whisper. Mom studied her son's face for a long moment. You look terrible. I feel terrible. Good. You should. But there was no malice in her voice. Come here. Jacob approached the bed cautiously, like he was expecting her to lash out at him. Instead, Mom reached out and took his hand. I don't understand what happened between you and Marcus, she said quietly. I don't know if I'll ever understand it. But you're my son, and I love you. And I'm not going to lose you over this. Jacob started crying then. Deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep in his soul. Mom pulled him down into a hug, and for a moment, they were just mother and son again, holding each other through the pain. We're going to get through this, Mom whispered. All of us. Together. It's going to take time and therapy, and probably more tears than any of us want to shed. But we're going to get through this. Looking around at my broken, complicated, impossible family, I realized that Mom was right. We would get through this. Not because what had happened was okay. Not because the pain would ever fully go away. But because sometimes love is stronger than the mistakes we make. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, we get the chance to start over. 6 months later, we're still in therapy, both family sessions and individual ones. Jacob moved back to Manhattan after spending a month in Portland, thinking things through. Marcus and Mom are separated but talking, working through their issues with a counselor. Chloe is doing better, though she still has nightmares sometimes. And me? I'm learning to use my words to heal instead of hurt. I got a job at a nonprofit in Brooklyn that helps families in crisis, and every day I see people who are fighting to rebuild their lives after devastating betrayals and losses. Our family will never be the same as it was before that terrible Sunday dinner. But maybe that's okay. Maybe what we're building now, based on honesty instead of secrets, understanding instead of judgment, will be stronger than what we had before. If you've made it this far in our story, thank you for taking this journey with us. Life is messy and complicated, and families are the messiest and most complicated part of all. But they're also worth fighting for, worth rebuilding, worth the hard work of forgiveness. Sometimes the most broken things, when put back together with love and patience, become the most beautiful.